Last fortress, when 500 held back an empire. They came at dawn. Iron banners, gold-armored legions, thunder in their march. For 3 years, the empire swallowed kingdoms like breath. Now, it came for the frontier, a tiny fortress of stone and stubbornness. 500 defenders stood behind its gates. Farmers, smiths, deserters. No match for trained armies. Yet no one fled. Led by a scarred captain named Idrin, they prepared not for victory, but for remembrance. The Empire offered mercy in exchange for surrender. Idrin answered with a single arrow that struck the messenger's horse dead. Silence followed, then drums, siege engines, and the first stones slammed against the gate. Inside the walls, prayers mixed with sharpened blades. The defenders knew the cost. But some places aren't defended for power. They're held for pride, for legacy, for the fire that says, "Here, we do not kneel." So began the battle for the last fortress. The first assault came like a storm without warning. Walls trembled, arrows blackened the sky. The Empire's infantry marched without fear, numbers overwhelming. But inside the fortress, every corridor, every step had been turned into a trap. Boiling oil, hidden pits, collapsing passages. For every man who breached the gate, 2 didn't walk out. Idrin fought in the thick of it, bleeding, cursing, leading by fury. On the second day, the Empire tried fire. Flames licked the sky, but rain came, as if nature itself chose a side. Morale flickered, but never broke. Women fought beside men. Old men held blades with shaking hands. They weren't warriors, but they made themselves one strike at a time. At night, songs were sung, not for glory, but to drown out the screams. The defenders counted the dead and patched the wounded. They didn't talk of victory, only of holding on one more day. On the third night, the Empire launched a surprise assault under cover of darkness. Torches lit the black sky red, and war horns shattered sleep. But the defenders were ready. Idrin had guessed this move. The gate opened, not in surrender, but to lure them in. The first wave entered with confidence and met a rain of fire. Molotovs, oil traps, collapsing stone. Screams filled the night. Chaos reigned, but with chaos came sacrifice. The Empire retaliated with fury. Explosives tore through barricades. Blood slicked the stones. A young scout named Rika led a countercharge, torch in hand. She never made it back. Her fire, however, lit the sky and rallied the broken. By dawn, smoke choked the sun, but the fortress still stood. Bodies burned in piles. Water was gone. Hope was dim. But the Empire had lost 100 men for every inch. And still, the gates held firm. Day 4 brought silence, then horns. The Empire formed ranks for a full-scale assault. They believed the defenders were broken. They weren't. Tired, bloody, desperate, but not broken. Idrin limped to the wall with sword in hand and voice unshaken. He shouted a single command, hold. The Empire advanced in waves. The first met arrows. The second, boiling sand. The third climbed ladders, only to fall to axes and rocks. Still they came. A veteran named Koro collapsed the eastern wall himself, luring 50 enemies to their deaths. He didn't survive it. The defenders retreated to the courtyard, their last stand drawn in blood. The Empire pushed harder, but every fallen fighter bought one more breath of resistance. Every stone, every hallway, every body mattered. They didn't need to win. They just needed to cost the Empire more than it could bear. And as the sun set, they still held the line. The fifth day was pure agony. The outer walls had fallen. The gate was shattered. Half the defenders were dead or dying. Supplies were gone. There was no water, no food, just blood, sweat, and stubborn defiance. The Empire surged in, confident the end had come. But even cornered, the defenders fought like demons. They turned the inner fortress into a kill zone. Spears jabbed from broken doorways. Arrows fired from crumbling balconies. Idrin was wounded, barely able to stand. Still, he shouted commands, dragging fallen comrades to safety. A pair of brothers fought side by side until one fell, and the other screamed his rage and his steel. The courtyard was soaked in death, and yet there was no surrender. Only grit, only pain. The defenders no longer hoped for survival, only for meaning. If they were to die, it would not be quietly. It would be loud enough to echo. By the sixth morning, only 50 remained. Faces hollow, hands raw, but eyes still fierce. Idren stood before them, voice shaking but proud. He said, "They expect us to die. Let's make sure they remember how." They charged, not to win, but to remind the Empire what it cost to conquer free people. They fought through fire, smoke, and thunder. The enemy general watched in disbelief as ragged survivors tore through his elite guard. Arrows rained, blades flashed, limbs broke, but the defenders did not break. Idren reached the general, locked eyes, and threw a torch into their supply crates. The explosion ripped through the battlefield. The Empire's center collapsed in chaos. Bodies flew, fires roared, and then silence. The charge had ended. The defenders were gone. But in that silence, something stirred. A legend. A question. How did so few defy so many? And why did their names refuse to die? The fortress was ash, but its defiance still echoed. No monument stood, no victory songs played. Only silence, heavy and sacred. Among the rubble, a young girl planted the torn banner of the 500. The wind caught it, and for a moment, it felt like they breathed again. The Empire never returned. They called the land cursed, a place where empires died and legends were born. Over time, the grass swallowed the blood, but not the story. Generations later, a child reading that story whispered the name Idren and smiled. No statues were needed. Their legacy lived in the choice to stand when surrender was easier. 500 souls had no reason to fight, and yet they did, so others might live free. If their story moved you, share it. Let the world hear their stand. Remember them. Speak their names. Because when courage is forgotten, so is freedom. If this story lit a fire in you, don't let it fade. Share their sacrifice. Let the world hear the echo of the 500. Subscribe for more forgotten legends and untold battles. Comment the word defiance to honor their stand. Because stories like this deserve to live, not in silence, but in every voice that dares to remember.